Thank you so much. Lovely. Okay, I shall pass on to Catherine.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. Just a very brief orientation about what is going to happen in the session. There's going to be 3 parts to it. First, we are going to have a keynote from Dr. Matteo Giusti. Then David Higgins and I are going to share the results of an EEUK project about enterprise education and planetary sustainability that we completed earlier this year, and we're going to say what has come out of that for us. And then the final part of the session is that there's going to be space for discussion, ideas, sharing and connection. Just a reminder that it would be great to double check that you are on mute right now. And with that said, and without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to hand over to our keynote, Matteo, whose research is about cultural shifts towards sustainability. And Matteo, over to you.
Thank you so much. I will just start by sharing my screen if everybody is fine with that. And yes, well, I mean, thank you for inviting me, Catherine and Rob. We met briefly at your last conference where I presented that. And yeah, well, they decided, Catherine and Rob decided to invite me again. So I'm really happy to be here. And I really hope to give you a presentation that resonates with you, that inspire you, and then give you some food for thought. Catherine told me to give the same presentation that I gave at the conference, but I decided to change it a bit. You see my screen, right? Yeah, so this is what we're going to talk about today. I need to start with the big picture. I need to start with a big problem. I'm not going to stress it that much, but we need to be aware that there's a starting point. And then I'm going to address what is sustainability, what I think is the foundation of sustainable development, and what we can do. So let's start with the big bad picture. The big bad picture is that we are on a ball of dust, pretty much. We are on a ball of dust that in the last 4 billion years got very moldy. The life emerged. We got bacteria, plants, algae, we got trees, we got life. We got a web of life that created a bubble. They created a bubble around this ball of dust. And this bubble of life is called biosphere. This is a very thin layer surrounding Earth, and it's between the atmosphere and 2 kilometers of crust. And this is the only place in the universe where we know there is life. The web of life that created this bubble, is currently maintaining an equilibrium that is extremely desirable. It's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's not too windy, it's not too rainy. We're not exposed to space. And this kind of stability, this kind of equilibrium is what allowed us monkeys to develop agriculture, develop democracy, to develop the internet, etc., etc. We are now living in an era which is called the Anthropocene, where human effects, the human actions are affecting this bubble. They're affecting the natural forces that have created this bubble. And I want to give you just 2 examples. One example is obviously the amount of CO2, the percentage of CO2 in the atmosphere. We have reached 417 parts per million. It's never been this high for the last 800,000 years. 800,000 years, Homo sapiens didn't even exist. One of the few reasons why we have managed to develop agriculture, we managed to develop complex societies, is because climate has been stable. And we're losing this climate stability. We are pushing the Earth system, the climate system, outside of these boundaries. And it's not only the climate that is changing. It's also, I don't know if you are familiar with the climate strips and the biodiversity strips, but it's also the biodiversity. We are impacting the very web of life that have created such stability in the first place. We are in the middle of the sixth max extinction. This shouldn't become as a news. We have lost 70% of wildlife since 1970. So this is the existential threat. This is the existential threat to our cities, to our lives, to our concerns, to our ambition. This is the existential threat to everything that we have ever known as humanity. We are undermining a very desirable, stable state that allowed first human to develop and then to develop into peaceful and healthy society. We cannot afford to break the bubble. I don't think we can afford to break the web of life that had created this bubble and is maintaining this bubble in the first place. Otherwise we just go poof. We are just on a bowl of dust. And we are insignificant in comparison to the universe. So we need to steward this bubble. We need to steward the web of life that created and maintained this bubble, that created and maintained this desirable state. And this is the first point that I want to make. This is the end of the big bad news, but we are undermining our possibilities for life on Earth, for a healthy and peaceful life on Earth. This is what is referred as Earth system collapse. This is the existential threat in a nutshell. What is sustainability then? Well, sustainability science is how to make sure that this bubble doesn't go pop and doesn't disintegrate. Unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, sustainability is becoming a meaningless word because it can mean reduce energy, it can mean increase recycling, it can mean increase cycling, stop extracting oil, pay attention to polar bears, plastic in the ocean, it can mean anything you want. It's been used and abused as a word. So I would like to kind of clarify what I mean by sustainability, what I think sustainability is. And I think sustainability is an equitable and long-lasting co-evolution with the biosphere, is an equitable and long-lasting development. And it is about development since the very beginning. Sustainable development, by definition, is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And by definition, it's not about saving the planet. By definition, it's about saving future generations. By definition, is meeting the needs of future generation, making sure that today's people don't ruin the possibility for tomorrow's people to live on the planet. Ideally, those needs will not be just providing bread and butter to future generation, but it will be providing the possibility for an enjoyable life, an enjoyable, healthy life, and I would say strongly a life without the struggle and the suffering of survival that have characterized all previous human life. We just don't want our children and grandchildren to suffer. So there is a way to create development that allow that to exist. And you might wonder what's wrong with the development that we have. Since the 19th century, global life expectancy passed from 29 years old to 71 years old. Literacy passed from 12 to 88%. And child mortality passed from 43% to 4%. This is undeniable development. Undeniable development. These figures are at the global level. So even if, and we know there is inequality in these figures show undeniable development. What's the problem with this? Why are we trying to change how we got to this development? Because what you're looking here is peak development. Sustainable development is long-lasting. The amount of the resources that we have used to reach this development will not be available to future generations. So what we are going to see in the future, if this scale could continue, is peak development. We will see a rapid decline in this development. This is sustainability. This is sustainable development. If you put the human development score across the material footprint, you will see that we live well above, I live in the UK, well above a sustainable threshold. And so that's the USA, most of Europe, etc. We have consumed more resources than the Earth system is able to produce in the same amount of time. So the next generation will not have the same resources to reach the same target, to reach the same amount of development. What we have to do is do a bit of a squeeze. We need all those circles, all those people to pass through the little gap, this little blue square that is under a sustainable threshold and is above is high human development. And I'm saying that we need all of those circles to pass through the gap. Because, and this is the equitable dimension of sustainable development, if COVID has taught us something, is that we live on a very connected planet. If something doesn't work well in China, it's not going to work well in the US or in Europe. Greenhouse gas emissions have no boundaries. Ocean acidification has no boundaries. Biodiversity loss has no boundaries. The plastic that is discarded in Taiwan is then going to be found in the fish in the UK. We live on one planet. We live on one ball of dust. We're all together. So we all have to go through this little square. And I want to make another point, because I often hear the narrative that is, well, there has been a historical narrative that is the number of people that is the issue on the planet, and it is not. Historically, greenhouse gas emissions are responsibility of what I call weird countries, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. It's Europe and the US. It's our kind of progress that led us to this state. It's our idea of development that led us to this state, not the big population of Africa, India, and Asia. And even if we look, this is a graph from Oxfam that was released just before COP28, but they did the same, exactly the same analysis in 2015. We see that the bottom 50% of people emit as much emission as the richest 10. If we account for reaching a sustainable lifestyle, which is a lifestyle of 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial level, 50% of the planet could increase their greenhouse gas emission by a factor of 2. They can double their emission. All these people, 4 billion people, they could double their emissions. These people, this top 10%, which is where we are, they had to decrease by a factor of 7. Top 1%, they had to decrease by a factor of 30. It's not the big population. It's not the people, it's the lifestyle. It's the idea of development that matters. So what is sustainability? To me, sustainability is equitable and long-lasting development with the biosphere. And I believe that it kind of starts with us. What do I think that is the foundation of sustainable development? Now we do have a goal. We do have the idea that we need to reach the sustainable development, a different way of developing. But what shapes this trajectory of development? How is this trajectory of development characterized? And I think that, me and probably a few other colleagues around the world, that if we are to achieve sustainable development, we need to align our idea of progress, our idea of development, with our biological reality. And I will tell you what this means. We live on the biosphere, we live on the planet. We are part of the planet, we are part of the biosphere. The biosphere has limits, has planetary boundaries. And this is our biological reality. And I don't want to just tell you what I mean. I just want to make you feel what I mean. So now we're going to do a little bit of an exercise. Please, you can raise your hand. Choose the diagram that best describe your relationship with nature. Okay? Choose the diagram that best describe your relationship with nature. You can raise your hand on Zoom when I on it. So Is it this one, the diagram that best describes your relationship with nature? Are you here? Are you here? Are you here? Yeah, more or less. Here. Yeah, Barbara. Here. Here. All right. So most of you are here. These three circles here. This is a method in environmental psychology called inclusion of nature in self. It is used to understand self-identity with nature, but that's not the point. The point is that I have another question for you. What's that part? If you answered here, or if you answered here, what's that part? What's this part of you? What is this part of you that is not nature? Aren't we just product of natural evolution? Aren't we just well-dressed monkeys? The human body is composed of not even 50% of human cells. The other 50% is just bacteria, microbes, and viruses that basically we use to digest food and stay healthy, and they use us for shelter. We are not even human. We are not even 50% humans ourselves. So what's this? What's this you that is not nature? And the other question is, how come that we all agree that there is a distinction to be made between us and nature? Nobody ever, I can tell you, ever, I do this exercise very often, ever answer this. We all believe in this separation because this is embedded in our culture. This is by definition. This is the definition of nature that you have used to answer my question 10 seconds ago. Is the phenomena of the physical world collectively, including plants, animals, the landscape, and other features and products of the earth, as opposed to humans and human creations. As opposed to human creation. This is inescapable. This is not something you can't escape. Every time I use the word nature, we imply this definition. Every time you use the word nature, I use the word nature, I assume a separation between humans and nature, humans and the biosphere, people and planet. And this is cultural. This is a definition that has roots in philosophical roots that are at least 400 years old. And I want to give you a hint of that because I want to give you a hint of what it means, because one of the first to describe or verbalize the disconnection between people and planet was Descartes in the 1600s. And he was one of the fathers of the scientific revolution, but he was a firm believer that animals cannot reason and do not feel pain. Animals were like mechanical robots. This is a figure of that time. Descartes believed that only humans were conscious, only humans have minds and souls, only humans can learn, only humans can have language. So only humans were deserving of compassion and empathy. Animals were like clocks. They were equivalent to machines. And you wouldn't, if you bump into a machine, if you bump into a car, you wouldn't say sorry. You can just use and abuse animals and natural resources because they don't feel anything. The assumption here is that the earth is a machine. The earth and all living beings is a machine, and we are not part of it. This is the belief that has been a core driver of the Industrial Revolution. It is acceptable in our culture to own and degrade land. It is acceptable to own and mistreat other animals. And nature ultimately is there for us to be used and abused, not to be taken care and stewarded for future generations. And this is our culture. This is embedded in the structure, in the economic structure, in the financial systems. This is embedded in everything that we do. It's embedded in the definition of nature. And I'm telling you that it's cultural because not all cultures agree on this. Eastern culture have a very different idea of what nature is, but particularly indigenous culture have a different idea. And they don't have a word for nature. They don't have nature as a word. They use the word land very often, many indigenous communities. and land is their ancestors. Land is the land that owns people. It's not people that owns land. It's a completely different way of seeing the world. And it's quite telling that indigenous people are 5% of the world population, and they're responsible for 80% of the remaining biodiversity. 80. 5% of world population responsible for 80% of remaining biodiversity. So how we collectively agree on what is our relationship with nature has fundamental power to shape sustainable or unsustainable societies. And this is the essence of, this is not the essence, but this can be seen also from a system theory point of view. Environmental degradation is just the tip of the iceberg. Climate change is the tip of the iceberg. Biodiversity loss is just the tip of the iceberg. The climate, these are just the visible events that are above water. But under that, we have the trends, we have the structures that allow these trends to exist. We have the legislation, the businesses, the purposes, the goals. And this is what we need to redesign. Oh, sorry. I skip forward. Under the structures is the mental model, is what we agree. What are our assumptions, the set of assumptions that we use to create the goal and purposes of the structures. So only by addressing the mental model, we can transform the system. We can dissolve the problem that we see. Otherwise, if we focus only on the events, the only thing that we can do is react to this event, adapt, barely mitigate. And I want to give you another example of the power of assumptions. If we all agree that one race is superior to another, we will inevitably create a racist system. Racist economic incentives, racist laws, and apartheid is the only possible outcome of this. There will never be equality between races if we agree that one race is superior to another. Equally, if we agree all collectively that one gender is superior to another, we will inevitably create a sexist society. Sexist economic incentives, sexist laws, etc., sexist structures. And there will never be gender equality unless we address the assumption. Unless we make the assumption, unless we address it. But what if we all agree, like I showed you before, that one species is superior to another? This is not racism, it's not sexism, it's called speciesism or anthropocism. And we believe that nature, in this assumption, we believe that nature only has value when it's used by humans. We are superior. We are the apex of creation. We are superior to other species. And this is embedded in the structure, the system, the goal, the concerns, in everything that we have. This is the separation between human and nature is built in our society, is built in our cities, is built in our constitution, is built in our laws, is built in every institution. So environmental exploitation and degradation is embedded in the system, is the only possible outcome of these assumptions. And I think this is a systemic problem. I think that's inescapable. And I mean, it would be fine, but we could accept that. We could accept, we could believe and develop a society like we have done that agrees that we are superior to all other species, and we are not part of the Earth system. We're not part of the biosphere. The issue is that this is not real. Like this assumption that we are separated from nature does not match our biological reality. We are nature. We are monkeys, whether we like it or not. And we can only develop our societies in cooperation with the biosphere, in cooperation with the web of life, and within its planetary boundaries. We are developing society on something that is completely unrealistic, and it's not supported by any form of science. And this is creating big issues, and this is why I think that this is one of the most fundamental cultural shifts that we need to create to promote a sustainable society. This is one example that was picked up by The Guardian. What is the boiling point? Humanity must redefine relationship with nature. I mean, I happen to write that report, so they got it from somewhere. But this is also one of the reasons why the SDGs, I don't think they should be visualized like this. And a lot of academics in sustainability science do not agree with this visualization, but they show the SDGs like this, like a wedding cake, because without a biosphere, we will never be able to have a society or an economy. Without life on land and life on water, we will never be able to have the possibility to have peace and justice and sustainable cities and communities or regional poverty. We will never be able to have a good health and well-being. In order to have a thriving economy, we need a thriving society, we need a thriving biosphere. This is our biological reality. This is not. This reflects our biological reality. This is just more scientific, really. So what I think is the foundation for sustainable development, I think is aligning our idea of progress, our idea of development with our biological reality, our goals, our purposes with our biological reality. Earth is not a machine. And we are part of the web of life. The only thing that we can do is to create a co-evolution with the biosphere that allows us to live in cooperation and in harmony with all other living beings. So given this is what I think is a very important dimension of sustainability, what can we do? Well, what can you do? I think you're very well placed. You're very well placed because you educate. And this is a question that Catherine was asking me like a few days ago. Like, what can we do? I think you're extremely well placed because you're educators. You have the authority to create culture. You have the authority to create culture among those who create development, to create innovation, who conceive innovation. So I think you're extremely well placed to promote this cultural shift. And I would like to just highlight a pitfall that is often a pitfall of what innovation is, really. Because I don't think sustainable innovation is a technological fix. So it's not a technological fix. It's not. We shouldn't talk about sustainable gadgets. And I want to give you a very clear example. Do I still have time? Yeah, I still have 5 minutes. Let's go to 5 minutes. This is an example that I gave. Are you familiar with the Operation Cat Drop? I know Catherine is. Okay, Operation Cat Drop is the early 1950s. We're in the middle of Borneo. And there is an indigenous community that live here. Well, I don't know if there are indigenous communities, but there's a community living in Borneo, and they have an outbreak of malaria brought by mosquitoes. So the World Health Organization decides to intervene, and it sprays DDT to kill the mosquitoes. The mosquitoes that carry the malaria. Perfect. They hammered the problem. They killed the mosquitoes. No more malaria. The malaria declined. What happens is that not all insects died. Some were just poisoned by the DDT, and then they were eaten by the geckos in this ecosystem. And the gecko got poisoned by the DDT, but it didn't die. But the geckos were eaten by the cats. And the cats got poisoned by the DDT, and they actually died. So because the population of cats died, the population of rats flourished. So all of a sudden, in this community in Borneo, they passed from having an outbreak of malaria to having an outbreak of typhus and plague. The WHO felt to be responsible about it and decided to parachute 14,000 live cats in the middle of Borneo live cat, 14,000 live. Imagine the scene. Imagine the scene. That would be amazing. So they parachuted 14,000 live cats to handle the population of rats, to decrease the population of rats. So even with the best intention, this is an example that we cannot intervene in an ecosystem. We cannot intervene in the earth, considering the earth like a machine. If we want to, I'll give you another example. If you want to understand the trajectory of a missile or trajectory of a rocket, it's easy. This is physics, engineering, mechanics. It's a most complicated. This is just rocket science, okay? But what if you want to understand and predict the trajectory of a dog? The dog is an alive system. It's not complicated, it's complex. Dog is alive. What's the trajectory of the dog? Does the dog know you? Is it taken by surprise? Are you just smiling? Are you aggressive? There's nothing to do with the amount of power you put in the kick. You cannot increase or decrease or alter the trajectory of the dog by increasing the efficiency of the kick. You can't predict where the dog goes because the dog is alive. So you cannot alter the trajectory of the dog using physics and engineering. So how can you predict or change the trajectory development of everything that is alive using physics and engineering? How can we address climate change, which is it's a hugely complex and adaptive system using physics and engineering? The Earth will react like a dog, not like a rocket. So this is why I'm a bit wary of geoengineering methods to resolve the climate crisis. I believe we shouldn't focus on technological fixes. And I give an example to, I wouldn't say resolve, but address the issue of energy over renewable energy. How do we promote renewable energy systems? Do we need more tech? Do we need more development? One of the biggest issues with wind and solar farms is that nobody wants to see them. Nobody wants to see them. They're ugly. I can understand how they can be more ugly than a coal factory, but people think they're ugly. How do you resolve that problem? With more tech, more engineering, or by giving the wind and solar farms to people? These are community-based and cooperative model of ownership of wind and solar farms, and now involve 1 million citizens and more than 1,500 cooperatives around the world. Here is the community that is the innovation, it's not the technology. So the problem, this is not a technological fix. This is not a sustainable gadget. So what can we do? I think that if you specifically, I would say that don't consider innovation as a technological fix. And I would say prioritize people and planet before profit in the purpose of enterprises. I tried to make a sentence only with P's, but I had to put enterprises there. And if you don't want to do it for sustainability, do it for the people that you teach. Culturally, we are becoming obsessed with identifying our worth, our status with profit and money. But ultimately, chasing or spending our whole life chasing status and glory via profit and via financial capital will not provide us with health, well-being, happiness, or joy. This is also science. All the science on now I lost the word, but I would say that a much more fulfilling life will come in a much more healthy life. We will come from aligning the purpose of enterprises with the promotion of the well-being of people and planet. And here I just put some examples that I'm not in your field, so this might look silly and stupid and too overly simplified. But these are the ones that I'm familiar with. So this is what I told you today. What I told you today is that I think we are undermining. It's not without I think. We are undermining life on Earth, and we are life. I told you that sustainability is equitable and long-lasting co-evolution with the biosphere. And I told you that we need to promote a cultural shift to align progress, what we think progress is, with our biological reality. And I also told you that people and planet should become before profit and try to avoid sustainable gadgets. In these slides, I put some points of intervention that I'm not going to go through, but I will send you this and some references. And I'm not going to go through those, but it's good to have them in the slides because you can go there and have a look at them if you want. And I will put the slides, I think, probably on LinkedIn, so that everybody can have access to it, everybody can see them. And if you were here, I will also give you this. Where is the camera here? Here is a pin that says, I am 100% nature, but you're not here, so I cannot give you the pin. I will, as soon as I have the possibility to send you some pins, or as soon as I have the possibility to, I don't know, have a system in place that allows these pins to go somewhere. At the moment, I only have 2 left. I will send you the pin. Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully next time that, somebody tells you you're an animal, you don't take it as an offense. I think that would be my last point. And I'm gonna stop here because I know I'm already late. I'm sorry, Catherine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Rob, but I need to stop talking. I like this.
Thank you so much, Matteo. Really, really enjoyed that. And it's quite a challenging presentation to listen to for me, because I'm holding the tension in my mind about what it means to be an enterprise educator, often implicated in that consumption piece. You showed the funnel of consumption. And so I can't make a question in my own mind, but that's one of the things that I'm thinking about right now. We have got 3 minutes before we need to move on. And of course, we've got the discussion time at the end. But does anybody have an immediate comment? It doesn't even have to be a question. It might be something that is going through your mind right now, prompted by that really provoking presentation from Matteo. So it doesn't have to be a question. You might have a question and you're free to ask it. We've got a couple of minutes before we need to move on, or might just be something that you're thinking. And Matteo, while we're waiting to see if anybody can respond, is it all right if you unshare your screen right now, and I will start teeing myself up? And feel free to put something in the chat if you want to leave a comment, a thought, or a question. Did Matteo say he's on LinkedIn? I can't find him. Yeah, Matteo, do you want to answer that?
I am on LinkedIn. I cannot tell you why you cannot find me, but I can first find my link, and then I can put it in the chat.
Okay, anything else coming through just now, or otherwise, please do. I'm thinking about language, Natalie Bennett. I'm thinking about language in some groups I work with. We're talking about regeneration rather than sustainability. Any thoughts in 1 minute, Matteo?
Yes, so regenerative sustainability is I would say, is the frontier of sustainability science, and is one aspect, one dimension of sustainability science that aims at promoting good, not only to achieve zero harm, which is sustainability. It doesn't aim to achieve no harm on the planet, but it aims to increase biodiversity or have a positive effect on the biosphere. I'm all for regenerative sustainability, and especially from an ontological point of view, because they are really promoting the idea that we are part of nature, and the only way for us to live on this planet is by enriching biodiversity, not only enriching the health and well-being of the planet, and not only enriching the health and well-being of people. So yes, Carrie.
Right, thank you.
Regenerative sustainability, very good.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Matteo. And a comment also from Caris, a really interesting presentation, made me think more about fashion and Instagram influencers and not seeing the carbon footprint of those online activities, especially shopping. Actually, to add to that, because there's such a buzz about AI, and then entrepreneurship education, colleague called Gustav Haag posted a really interesting article about the water usage of I don't know if it's like the AI, what would they be? Anyway, the technical stuff that sits behind AI, but that's another trend that we're all embracing enthusiastically without thinking about the material implications going on in the background. Please do continue to put your comments and questions in the chat. I'm going to keep the agenda moving along because we've only got 2 hours this afternoon. So we've done the first part of the session. That is that keynote from Matteo, who has set out in a really compelling, kind of mind-boggling way, actually, what is at stake when we're thinking about enterprise education and planetary sustainability. And so in the next part of the session, I'm going to introduce the project that Dr. David Higgins and I worked on that we completed with Enterprise Educators UK this year. I'm going to say something about where it's taken me, and then David is going to share where it's taken him, and then we will break into some discussion and sharing. So hopefully, yeah. So this part of the presentation really speaks to the fourth element of Matteo's talk, in that one of the challenges that I'm thinking about is how one changes oneself to be more in service of sustainability. And there are amazing people doing amazing things in this field, and they have been doing for some time. In fact, some of them are on this call. So I'm very much talking about my own personal situation. I'm not saying that this work isn't going on, but rather, you know, I haven't been involved in it, and there's probably quite a few enterprise education colleagues who will feel the same, you know, feel that it's perfectly possible to go to work, to go to conference, to read and write about enterprise and entrepreneurship education as if there are no biological limits. So the project that David and I developed aimed to explore and at least offer one way to answer the question about how do you go about changing oneself if you are not feeling very sustainable at the moment. So I'm going to start with the end at the beginning, and I'm going to say that there are some resources and scholarly outputs from this project. So the project ran from July 2022 until August 2023. Out of that, we developed a workshop toolkit. There's actually a second edition, which is on my ResearchGate. We had a conference paper that was education focused about what it means to be an enterprise and entrepreneurship educator in an age of climate and ecological breakdown. And then a book chapter about how, well, the motivation to reorient our scholarship at this time as well. So when David starts talking, I'll actually drop the link into the toolkit into the chat so that you can easily access that. Essentially what our project was about was creating a dialogic, I'll explain that word in a minute, process to effect change in ourselves. And if you look at the process on the right, hopefully you see from number 2 that what is going on in the process that we developed was we were recruiting for a workshop, we were putting on an event, we were making sure people had a good time at this event, we were following up with people, we were building new connections, we were building co-planning and commitment, and through that process, we were creating new to us activity. So that should feel really familiar to lots of people working in enterprise education. We put on events, we get people together, we meet new contacts, it leads to new activity. So hopefully that's really familiar. 2 things that I think are important about this particular process is number 1, the idea of creating to a connecting to a dialogic perspective. The reason why I think that that's important is that it helps, at least in a small part, to answer the question that Matteo brought up in number 4, what is it that we can do? And that perspective gives us some way of thinking about that. And I'll say more about that in a moment. And the second thing that I really think is really important is number 2, is when connecting with stakeholders for this workshop, that diversity is really important. In the workshop, one of the key activities in the middle is asking participants, given the climate and ecological context, what is it that we can do? So if you imagine that you had a room of just business and enterprise academics, yeah, you'll get certain types of answers to that question. If you added some sustainability academics in there, you might get some slightly different answers to that question. If you added some students in there, again, there would be a diversity of responses. If you added some community groups in there, some advocacy groups, some activists, you will get different answers to the ones that you would come up with yourself. So the key part of number 2 is trying to achieve that diversity in who you get in the room. So essentially in this project, we're talking about a workshop process, and it's underpinned by this perspective called dialogic change. And why that's important is the dialogic perspective has a particular idea about how change happens. So there's this idea that there's the status quo. The status quo is disrupted in some way, and then people act in differentiated ways. They start undertaking different activities in response to that disruption, and that out of that emerges more complex and more coherent ways of acting together. If you take that on as a change process, it means that one way to act is to engage with that process and prioritize activities and mindset which facilitate future focused dialogue with stakeholders involved in this disruption to generate new ways forward. So going into this workshop, we had no idea what would come out of it. That's the point of emergence. You bring people together, you create a pleasant experience for them, which enables them to work together. You pose what's called a generative question. So you don't focus too much on what has gone before or the problems, a very brief briefing, and then what can we do? So if and when you go to the toolkit, you will see that there are 3 parts to the workshop experience. The first part is a kind of feel-good networky part where people connected with each other and also shared their connection to sustainability. Then the main event, which is on the left-hand side of this screen, is an activity called Opera, where people work on their own and then in a pair to explain, rank and arrange their responses to the question that we posed, that generative question. And the question that we posed was, after a very brief briefing about the climate and ecological context, we said, given that context, what is it that we in EE could do? So it really connects with point 4 that Matteo was talking about. But what you're doing is you're generating answers to that with stakeholders in and around your university. On the right-hand side, what you're seeing is exit tickets that are kind of reactions to the experience. So in a dialogic perspective, it's good that people feel happy and that they have enjoyed the experience. Yeah, and the exit tickets on the right-hand side show that they were feeling inspired, they appreciated the diversity, they enjoyed the collaboration. So it was a positive event for them. The final part of the workshop is a reflective future search. And this is often something that people did by themselves individually. And that enabled us to capture ideas that did not make it through the collaborative process onto the opera board. These almost tended to be more radical than what made it onto the opera board, because people had to agree and then prioritize ideas on the opera board. So some ideas were removed from the opera board. Whereas with the future search, we asked people in 2 years' time, if everything was working well in enterprise education, what would that be like? And they gave us their responses here. And more information about this is available in the toolkit. So that explains what we did in the project, and what you'll see now is, from my perspective, where this activity has taken me, because the presentation was called Developing Oneself Towards Sustainability. So where did that process take me? Well, one of the people that I met when I was recruiting for the workshop was a colleague called Dr. John Lever, who was at University of Huddersfield, because this is where I did the project, business school. And he was already using Kate Raworth's donut framework. So we had a few chats about how he used it, and then started, for me, it wasn't new to him, but it was new to me, experimenting with that. So on the left-hand side, you see an activity called 4 Lenses, where you look at development from a social, ecological, local, and global perspective, and evaluate ideas. In the middle, you see an idea evaluation activity. So I think in enterprise education, I'm more used to ideas generation, like using effectuation. What is it that you could come up with the resources that you've already got? And John's perspective is we should be helping students think about the businesses and startups that the world actually needs. The world needs local and regional sustainable food systems. So instead of saying to participants, what is it that you can come up with? Rather, they had ideas given to them about businesses linked to that goal, local and regional sustainable food systems, and they looked at the pros and cons of those different business ideas. And on the right-hand side, you see the donut. If you've not come across this framework, this is Kate Raworth's donut model, where she combines planetary boundaries, which you just heard Matteo speak about, with some of the social dimensions of the Sustainable Development Goals, and explains that the good development is that happening in that space. There's a safe and just space for development to happen. And so the activity that John and I are doing in the bottom right-hand corner is rapid donut mapping, using the university as the starting point to think about planetary boundaries and social foundations, to engage people in thinking about that. All of these activities are available on a website called DEAL, the Donut Economics Action Lab. If you have or haven't seen that, it's an absolute, treasure chest of activity. And it did make John and I discuss how come that is not better used, because it's all there for us. They have an entire section on business and enterprise, and they have a framework about regenerative business design, the idea that businesses shouldn't just be sustainable, but that businesses should be regenerative. They should positively impact society and the environment. So that framework and ideas about how to develop those businesses are all there. And we wondered whether or not there was, what the message in terms of scholarship was, that meant that, is there a gap between what's happening in scholarship in literature and then what's happening in the ground that might create that gap between what is possible using resources like this, but then often what we were talking about is that we're still stuck using tools, let's say, for example, like the business model canvas, that erases ecology and doesn't direct our thinking towards that. So the final thing that I'm going to share in terms of where my practice has gone is some work that John and I did looking at our mother field. So entrepreneurship has been called the mother field of enterprise and entrepreneurship education. So we went to top tier journals and we did a very narrow search in Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice, Journal of Business Venturing, and Strategic Entrepreneurship Journal for planetary boundaries, and then also climate change, which is probably the most famous planetary boundary. And what we were thinking was, if these words don't pop up in these journals, if there isn't a concern, that might help explain why we don't see so much action on the ground. And what we found was kind of quite the opposite. So doing that search, there is a huge amount of concern in those 3 top tier journals. In fact, so much that we ended up creating these pragmatic headings all the way from natural world down to knowledge to demonstrate the range of concerns and demands. And I'll just give you a few examples of those. Oh, I'll go back, sorry. So in terms of the natural world, many of the things that Matteo was talking about make it into those journals. They're talking about species extinction, existential threat to humanity, and staying within the safe operating space being the most pressing issue of our time. I'm just trying to move my slide on. Oh, now I need to move it back. In terms of society and culture, one of the things that's talked about is how there is an equal cause and effect. So those people causing the issues, the climate and ecological breakdown, aren't necessarily those who are being affected by it. And also exactly what Matteo said, that temporal distribution of effect, so future generations being affected by current and past generations, that is being talked about in these journals, with the conclusion that the world is not aligned with sustainable development. In terms of economy, too many actors depleting all the resources, tragedy of the commons, exactly the kinds of things that Matteo was talking about. Is sustainability fundamentally at odds with the mode of capitalism that we've got and its emphasis on economic growth? And as a result of that, I focus on business practice, it being unsustainable and therefore transformation being required. In fact, this is vividly put, the creative destruction of harmful industries is what's needed. In terms of entrepreneurship, so more getting into our field now, the idea that climate change is going to remake entrepreneurship, and there's already quite broad definitions of entrepreneurship, but what's being advocated for is different types of entrepreneurship: institutional, political, informational, entrepreneurship in the public interest, collective and nature-based entrepreneurship. So creating value for the planet, and also the rather daunting warning that by 2030, more entrepreneurship is likely to be focused on the survival of the human species. In terms of entrepreneurs, a recognition that they don't make something from nothing. You know, every time there's a startup, there are material implications. So entrepreneurs' decision-making being influenced by their own perceptions of social and environmental threat, and also qualities such as compassion. It's really interesting that people are writing about the dark sides of some of the often qualities that are held up as really good, such as creativity. Actually, an entrepreneur might use their creativity to justify nature-destroying behavior. But equally, on the flip side, entrepreneurs can also change the way we imagine the world. They can articulate new possible worlds that are more conducive to the common good. And finally, the section where there was the most information and is so relevant to us is around knowledge. The idea, and this is what Matteo was saying in terms of shaping culture through education, that higher education institutions can influence the sustainability orientations of their students through what they do in class. They can spur students and students and colleagues into action, but also as scholars get ahead of the crisis and map roads forward. In fact, one of the most recent calls was for a new wave of scholarship to explore more radical ideas for systems change and systems change strategy. That is all going on in our most esteemed 4-star journals, which people often aspire to publish in and which look to for guidance. So absolutely, there is leadership there. So just to conclude, the final thing that has been that I've really personally appreciated getting out of this EUK project is a perspective on how change happens. And this picture on the right is called the 2 loops model of change. And it's the idea that there is a dominant but dying system. That is the top loop. And that there will be, in this system change, work needs to be done to hospice some of the old stuff that we've done, which is not so helpful anymore, and finish that work as new work emerges. Just because something ends, it doesn't mean that it was all bad. There's goodness that we can get out of our old practice. That's the idea of composting. And on the left-hand side at the bottom with this curve, there's the idea that rather than creating a critical mass where everybody needs to be on board and we need to change everybody, there's the idea in the 2 loops model that what you need to do is connect with other people that care and who are working in this area. Because people can become groups, groups can become networks, networks can form communities of practice, and communities of practice actually have a chance to influence system change. And one of the last things to leave you with is that, I'm going back, well, that was sad. Let me go back to that, see if I can share that. Can you see that? Is on the left-hand side a special interest group that is emerging from this EUK project. We're pulling together a proposal for a special interest group in this area, so we invite you to join it. And also another wonderful sustainability project has started, run by Barbara Tomasella at Derby University, and there's going to be a workshop on the 5th of March to look at the development of a sustainability mindset toolkit. So we'll send these slides out to you, and you, if you're interested, you can apply through that form there. So that is me done. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to stop sharing now. And I'm going to double check the time, because it may be that we just save all of our questions for the end. Yeah. Oh no, we've got a couple of minutes. And in that couple of minutes, I'm going to invite David to start teeing up his slides and just double check if there are any immediate questions or comments, or if not, we will crack on with David and then come back for a big discussion at the end. So David, do you want to start getting your slides together?
Okay, do I just share, Catherine? Is that it?
Yeah, you just share.
Okay, cool. Is that okay? Can everybody see that?
I can see that. Yeah, absolutely.
I haven't shared slides for a long time on Zoom. Sorry.
Yeah, Barbara. So just Barbara's made a comment. She's popped her email in the chat. So if anybody's interested in that project, actually getting involved in that, then drop her a line. And you're so welcome, Natalie. Glad that there was some new content in there. And while David kicks off, I'm going to pass over to David and I'll pop the link for the toolkit in the chat. David, over to you.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Catherine. I will have to say I've had a tooth out this morning, so I am. It's the numbness is just coming off, and it's getting a bit sore, to be honest with you. So I'm gonna work my way through this. I might be a little bit ahead of time if that's okay, Catherine, but sure, that gives you more time to chat. So I kind of wanted to take a different view of my influence in terms of the project and being involved in it. There are, of course, tangible outputs, and the two very quick tangible outputs. We've developed a Sustainable Future program now in the University of Liverpool Management School, and that's through the Centre for Sustainable Business. And that will now run, it's the first kind of cohort of which we've got about 30 business practitioners, and will run in January, and there's going to be another one in sometime in late April and May. And part of the work that I've been doing out of this project is actually fed in to that professional development program. Equally, I was asked would I write a sustainability module for the management school, which would be used university-wide. I don't think they got a sustainability module, to be honest. They got something a little bit different. But that's what I would like to talk about in the brief time that I have available to me, around how did I go about this, and what was my thinking. So this is more about what my thinking was rather than actually the procedure of how to write a module, because you all know that, so you do. So I'm going to flick through slides a little bit and just pick a few things out of it. But one of the big things we're here at Christmas, and I have to say I used to love Christmas. I don't particularly like Christmas now. And I was always kind of a bit like terrified, but why am I grown out of love of Christmas? What is it I've got a thing about it? And I guess what really struck me over the last few years about this festive period was this idea of tokens of kindness. You know, it's a period of time where we're all supposed to be really nice and kind and friendly to everybody. But yet, there's still January, February, March, April, May that exists as well. Why can't we be kind and appreciative to everybody throughout all those periods of the time of the calendar? Why is it just this particular time the emphasis is there? And of course, it's important the emphasis there. It's important we exercise our kind of values and virtues and appreciation for the places we're in and the people we're associated with and stuff like that. But surely that's something that should be continuous, not just celebrated at a particular time of year. And equally, the world is functioning all around us, you know, and everything seems to be going A-OK. And there's a few people talking about climate, but they've been talking about it for years. Why all of a sudden is it an issue now? And of course, it is an issue now. And we're deluded if we think it's not. And Matteo was very, very articulate in the message that he sent out in his presentation, if not very humbling, to be honest. So for me, then, I came into this project thinking, okay, well, what's kind of this all about? And I decided that there was a vein of work that I was becoming involved in around, myself as an educator, where was I positioning myself as an entrepreneurship educator? How did I feel about that? And so on and so forth. So there was a few things clashing together when this project emerged. And what I wanted to draw your attention to really was the stuff in green there that I started to grapple with in terms of, am I comfortable as being an entrepreneurship educator today? Am I comfortable as being one, given the ecological and social crisis that we're experiencing now? How do I make a contribution to that, really? To be honest, that was a big question for me. How do I do that? Do I believe in the curriculum that is being currently delivered, certainly within institutions that I'm aware of? And is that curriculum just simply buying into, listen, come do a module, we'll tell a little bit about sustainability, we'll have a bolt-on kind of lecture onto the sessions, and sure, that's all great, we tick the boxes, the matrices are looking good because we're mentioning sustainability, we're mentioning ecology and all those kind of things, so that's all great, we're doing a brilliant job, and so be it. And one thing that Catherine alluded to there was, what I found was, equally from the workshops that we did and from listening to Catherine as she was going through her journey around this area, was there seems to be massive pockets of great work going on, but there seems to be a lack of a voice in publicizing all the great things that are happening. And that's not kind of uncommon within certainly university systems. There could be a guy or a woman 2 doors down from you that's doing astounding work, and you may never ever know about it until by sheer luck you happen to bunch into them one day or something or other, or you attend a seminar and suddenly realize, oh my word, tonight, I never knew you were doing this. So I had these kind of personal thoughts about my own practice and what I was doing. And I did start to think about, what's my relationship, not just with myself, but with the world, the living world, but also the aesthetics world that are around us, the trees, the environments, and so on and so forth. And why have I become so detached from them? Is it just part of my normal practice? The tree is there, the birds is there, and I just assume things are there. And I kind of buy into the assumption that things are there and things are living. Not really thinking about, well, are they living to their maximum, or is there something going on here? So those kind of thoughts came into my head around, well, what am I doing? How am I writing? How am I teaching? And where does my worldliness sit within all this? Where does my citizenship within the local environment sit? And also the custodial nature I have as being an educator. How am I serving the people that come into my sessions and so on and so forth, and what's the message I'm propagating to them? That became very, very important to me. And when I get to my teaching rooms, and I don't teach a lot these days, but when I do, I tend to wander through the campus, and I like to see what's happening and kind of get my thoughts in gear for whatever session I'm supposed to be delivering. And I found myself over the last year thinking more and more about ideas of humility, wonder, being in awe of the situations we're in, of the world that we're in, and the humility that I was attaching to those things, and not this kind of taken for grantedness. And we've all come across that word loads and loads of times in our professions. And equally within that, where did entrepreneurship sit within all that for me? What did that look like in a world where we could be appreciative, we could be humble about what we do, we could be in wonder of the magnificence of the opportunities that entrepreneurship as a metaphorical term can give society and the world at large. So 4 kind of words came to my head quite a lot. The idea of being in the world as a living being. What constitutes that being in the world? What's my attachment to that? What's my sense of belonging to that? And then my worldliness, my overall understanding and identity that I was trying to construct within that world. So they were kind of 4 key pillars I started to think about. And another word came on top of me as I was doing that. And this was the idea of belatedness, that we seem to be born into a world, which is quite obvious, But we seem to be born into a set of conventions that we just adopt and we uptake and we run with. And the more we age in time, the more we're kind of just ingrained into these processes of this is how you live your life, this is how you behave, and this is what you do. So for me, I started to think about this idea of living inquiry and how within my teaching, we started to really bring our lived and living experiences into the world and start to bring how we can reorientate and rethink our relationships between ourselves, nature, our environment, one another, and so on and so forth. I started to think a lot about this idea of the processes of inquiry, and having been through the 2 workshops that Catherine initiated around the operatic process, it wasn't so much for me the actual opera process itself, but listening to how people were almost kind of wanting to answer into set questions rather than having freedoms to really talk about why were they there, what were they doing, and that really intrigued me. So I knew within modalities of inquiry we had practitioner-orientated focused approaches, but also appreciative inquiry as a means of how we start to maybe comprehend and understand. So within those kind of quadrants, I started to think, well, what would a module look like? What would I want to really start to think about? And this idea of estrangement became really important for me. So why are we covering up the natural world? Why can't the natural world be part of our experiences? Because we live in the natural world. And as Matteo was suggesting, we may not necessarily be monkeys, but we're certainly human living beings within a natural world of which we share that world with many other species as well as ourselves. And I suppose one thought that did strike me was we're probably quite brutal to one another in the world today. We lack maybe sometimes large amounts of humility, and we're all kind of very busy doing our own things and ingrained in our own routines and processes for very rational reasons. But equally, the question is, but could we do those differently? And could we show more humility? Could we show more citizenship? Could we show more collegiality, and so on and so forth? So as an educator, these kind of things were thinking about in my mind in terms of what does that look like? What do I need to think about when I'm writing this module for this task that I was given? So I guess the choices that I had became important. How I uncover the idea of this worldliness. How do I bring into being our social imagery and our estrangement to maybe the natural world around us and the social world around us? And then where does entrepreneurship fit into all of that, or the metaphorical idea of entrepreneurship fit into that? And certainly drawing from kind of ideas of axiological inquiry, certainly becoming more empathetic to ethics and kind of our own idea of how we make judgments and so on and so forth. So 4 key things came in the development of the module, but also in my influence on the Sustainable Futures program that the university is going to launch in January. And that was place, language, time, self, and other. The self and other being ideally being divided, but then being brought back together again. So these are kind of 4 key existentialist themes that I started to think about, underpinned by an axiological focus on the world and appreciative inquiry of being living in the world and being part of that collaborative, collective kind of process. So the place being the world I'm in now, the language, how I'm actually starting to speak about that word, but also how I'm speaking into that world. Not just how I'm speaking about the world, but how I'm speaking into it. What is the nature of my language? What is the undertone of my voice as I start to engage? Because don't forget, I'm thinking about what would I be like in a classroom doing this? What would that language be like? What would the tone of that language be like? The time, and that for me is a massive thing. And of course, there's been loads written around philosophy, around space and time and so on and so forth. But recognizing my time here in this world, but my time in terms of how I'm appreciating and understanding that world. And that time evolves. My values and virtues and so on and so forth, they're so different to what they are now and to what they will be and to what they were many years ago. My awareness and my attentiveness of being attentive to the circumstances I find myself in now and what my obligations are in that process. And then also, finally, myself. And we frame that as actually death, the death and rebirth of self, that we transition through multiple identities and multiple layers, all of which are shaping our experiences, our values, and propagating our cultures, and so on and so forth. So they for me were really pinnacle pillars upon which to build a module. Now, the module itself contains a lot of stuff around anthropology, specifically around judgments, morality, ethics, citizenship, behaviors, how we behave, how we interact, and so on and so forth, but also identity, and how our identities change, and how we relate, or our relationship to what we view as being entrepreneurial within the world. And of course, that's all kind of under the umbrella within social justice and so on and so forth. So these things were created, and that's great, and it's brilliant. And you know, they sailed through the various university things, but you know, you kind of are sometimes a bit facetious with that, because I kind of think, well, you know, it's got all the right words in it, and it's got critical in the right part, and it's got sustainability in the right part, and so on and so forth. But for me, it was more about, well, what does this look like in a classroom? It's okay writing it. We can all sit down and write it, and we can all come up with the right words and the right language. But how is that enacted in a classroom? It's kind of like the, you know, I won't swear, but it's kind of like the moment where you're sitting there, all the materials are in front of you, go, well, what do I do now? You know, what's next? You know, do I just deliver the slides? What happens? And I guess for me, coming out of that project, the EUK project, this is the next thing for me. You know, if I'm an educator and I'm a custodian of knowledge, and I think the roles we have as educators are, you know, they're vocations to me. And I get quite emotional. I cried at the dentist today, for crying out loud. So, you know, you know, I get quite emotional about these things. And I feel I have a huge obligation to shape how people might want to think about the world they're embarking into. You know, what graduate might be coming out of this particular module. And my center of interest now, which is collided with a center of interest that was going parallel to this project anyway, is, as an educator, what does the educator look like? You know, so we're getting these materials together. They're there. We know there are massive pockets of small, individualistic, impactful teaching practices. But then what does that educator look like? How does that educator support those practices, support those brilliant and innovative kind of pockets of teaching practice, of curriculum development? What does that educator start to look at? And I did wonder about myself, not about anybody else. Am I the right person to be teaching this? You know, do I have the right mentality? Do I have the right virtues? Am I drawing upon the right ideas in terms of how I inquire into this, how I lead students into process of inquiring and understanding about what we really need to do in terms of changing our habits, our behaviors, not just from an ecological point of view, but also from a social point of view, I think is massive. So that's kind of the journey I'm on at the moment, and starting to pull together a few things to form a next bit around, you know, what are the educators' values when it comes to educating around sustainability. And equally that feeds in to the SIG in terms of looking at getting all of these nuggets of brilliant practice and getting them into a room and saying, right, what does that look like? And more importantly, what's the person look like that's delivering these? Because that for me is a massive curiosity in its own right. Now, if it's okay, can I stop? Because my jaw is really killing me. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, David. Thank you so much for that. I really enjoyed that presentation. And so that means if David finished, that we are entering part 3 of this session. So you heard from Matteo talking about what's at stake in terms of planetary sustainability. You had an introduction to the project that David and I did and the different ways that took us. And now the final part of this session is hopefully to break into a little bit of discussion. There could be questions. There could also be practice that you've got that it would be really good to share at this point. I know in this audience, we've got people who've been at it a lot longer than we've been at it. And in fact, Matteo put on one of his slides something about harmonious entrepreneurship. And we've got David Kirby in here. So David, I don't know, without putting you on the spot, if you'd like to unmute and tell people, if you're there, David, give me a wave if you're willing to do this. You might tell us what harmonious entrepreneurship is and give people. Yes, sure, amazing. Sure, thank you.
Sure, Catherine. I've taught entrepreneurship all my life for 40 odd years. And I've done the same thing as everybody else, all of us entrepreneurship educators. We say how marvelous entrepreneurs are, how they bring about change, how they bring about improvement. But I was brought up in the northwest of England, and I saw that entrepreneurs had created an industry. They'd created wealth for themselves. They'd created jobs for people, and they'd actually created wealth for the country. And but at the same time, they destroyed the environment. They polluted the River Mersey. The flora and fauna was in dire straits. There was atmospheric pollution. There was acid rain going over to Scandinavia, killing the salmon in Norway. And I mean, that concerned me throughout the whole of my academic career. And I was sitting in the garden in lockdown, the first lockdown, and it suddenly occurred to me that the problem is that we have emphasized far too critically, and Matteo raised it, the concept of wealth creation. And Friedman actually said the responsibility of business is to the shareholders and to making as much money as possible. Yeah, I would disagree with Matteo. I don't think we should put planet and people first, but because by definition, business is about making money. But business should not be making money at the expense of people and planet. And what we've done is created a new approach to entrepreneurship using systems analysis that basically says profit, planet, and people should be in harmony. And when you formulate a business, you shouldn't just be thinking about how much money we make, but does this impact on the environment and does it impact on people? And this leads me into something that we've been doing with EE UK, which is basically, as Rob knows, been a history of entrepreneurship education in the UK. And basically what has happened in the UK since 1970 is government has more or less dictated to academia what they should be doing. We started off with the Bolton report saying that entrepreneurship education should be about small firms. And I used to have arguments with Alan Gibb because he would say all small firms are entrepreneurial and all big firms are not, which is, in my view, not true. We then moved into the Thatcher era when Thatcher had enterprise education enterprise in higher education, which was about making young people, irrespective of what discipline, more enterprising by changing the way we taught and the way it wasn't just learning by rote, and it wasn't just classroom based. It was working with industry. Then we moved into the UK SEC agenda, where it was all about science enterprise challenge and innovation. But essentially, and most recently, it's been about throwing money at universities to bring about change. I believe that what we ought to be doing as a body, EE UK, as intelligent people, is dictating the agenda. And we oughtn't to be waiting for government to tell us what to do. We ought to be telling government what they ought to be doing. And we've seen it in COP28. You know, I saw a report today, 78% of the people in Britain don't think COP28 will achieve anything. COP26, it was 68%. You know, they keep having these COPs, which cost a lot of money, generate a lot of carbon, and achieve absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
You know, we are in, and Rob made, Matthew made the point, we are in a position where we can actually bring about change. We can change the way our young people think. We can change the way our students think. We can change the way our peers, our colleagues think. And we can change the way employers and government think. And this is what I think EE UK ought to be doing.
Brilliant. Thank you.
But to do that, we need a critical mass.
Mm.
And I can't do it by myself, much as I would like and want to. I can't do it by myself. And this gets us back to what Catherine was saying. We need a community of interest. We need people. We don't all have to be doing the same thing. We can have a rich diversity, but we need people that have got the same common objective, that entrepreneurship education has to change. It has to pay attention to planet and people, as well as making money and profit.
That's a fantastic, fantastic input, David. Thank you so much. And I'm going to pass on to Sunil. I'm not going to pick up on it. I'm going to go to Sunil next, who's had his hand up.
Hi everyone. Sorry, I've got lots of ideas floating around in my mind. I think amazing talks by the speakers. I mean, I don't know where to start really. I'm just thinking about an event that recently happened to support at our university in Manchester. We had a graphene hackathon that happened on Saturday, and plenty of creative, smart creative students doing lots of things with gadgets, oscilloscopes, soldering stuff, and playing around with graphene and creating interesting things. Then as an afterthought, I realized, and I was watching a video on YouTube basically about Temu and how there's so many smart gadgets available to buy on Temu, and a lot of it is trash. And then there was another video I was watching that was saying how people are spending up to $18,000 on trash every year, unnecessary things that people don't need. And I was thinking, now at a click of a button, we can buy things. But then in the labs, that's what we're encouraging them to do in maker spaces, and where entrepreneurship happens among students. We're basically encouraging them to create the next gadgets. So in a way, I kind of agree that, yeah, I think technological fixes aren't going to solve the problem. And the other thing I can think about, which is really being talked about now, and I think when we think about these problems, and I think this is what I suppose students need to understand, is these are wicked problems to solve. When wicked problems have, basically many solutions, and wicked problems are often described as a symptom of another problem. And taking lithium as an idea, lithium suddenly become a problem because recycling is an issue, extraction is an issue. So that's sodium batteries. And what's being glorified, for example, on LinkedIn is, I've seen on LinkedIn, and a bunch of enterprising students created a sodium ion battery, and that's being glorified. But then that is actually a solution to a symptom that has been created by lithium batteries. And I think coming back to what I've been doing, and I think this kind of relates to an UK supported project that I'm doing, and you know, I'll probably talk about it at an event sometime next year. But I think one of the things I'm trying to do is how can we challenge this status quo consumption and status quo idea of entrepreneurship, and it was an interesting idea that David was talking about. What we teach and what we think can be completely different, and I think that's been my problem in the class. We only see very incremental ideas popping out in our enterprise, and we don't seem to challenge the status quo. Though I bring in external guest speakers to talk about responsible business, to talk about sustainability, we see very incremental ideas. And I realized, well, the problem is we are teaching them to tinker with things that encourage consumption on the one hand. On the other hand, we encourage them to do very incremental things. We don't encourage them to challenge the status quo. And the problem with that is because students don't want to work in groups. And you can't challenge status quo until you can work in groups. They like doing individual enterprise projects. And I think that's been a big kind of eye-opener for me, that we need more group projects to have some sort of a commons-based entrepreneurship, which is, if you want public ownership of resources, and things like the community energy idea, which was highlighted earlier, and which isn't a technical fix, is we need more group-based enterprise projects which would challenge the status quo and highlighting more about the wicked problems, and that wicked problems are unique and they need unique solutions. So yeah, I think I'll stop there, Catherine. But I've got lots of ideas rambling in my mind. But I just thought I'll highlight a few things from my own experience that I've been thinking about in the last 1-2 weeks.
So thank you so much, Sunil. And I didn't actually have time to show it, but you were on a slide of people whose thinking is inspiring me, because I was lucky enough to sit next to you at the ISBE dinner where you were talking about systems thinking again. So I really appreciate your thoughts and ideas. And what I was thinking about when you were talking was that funnel that Matteo showed earlier, which really implies that in Western countries we need to ungrow. We need to undevelop a little bit, not so everybody's in the cave with the hair shirt, which my most backward looking relatives might say to me when they talk about sustainability after the sherry at Christmas. But certainly it means that the sorts of ideas that students are having need to be different, and maybe as you're saying, the whole worldview itself needs to be different. And the other thing it was making me think as well about the group projects is, if we think about how challenging the planetary situation that Matteo described earlier is, then some of the assumptions that we've even got now, like putting students in groups and getting them to compete against each other, and the sorts of values and behaviours that come out in those kinds of activities, those are probably not helpful values and behaviours if we're heading into this period of decline and unsustained, breakdown, where what we really need is compassion amongst humans and cooperation and empathy and a willingness to share. And it's difficult sometimes to see that in enterprise projects, because there is a focus on succeeding by out-competing others. And maybe that's when I think about some of the things that need hospicing, that those are probably some of the things that need hospicing. But other people might have other ideas on here, or they might have comments or questions. So, or Matteo, you might give your thoughts about the funnel. Go, Matteo, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, well, I could talk about the funnel, but I had a thought from what Sunil, right? That's a correct pronunciation. Was saying, because individualism is also one of those cultural dimensions that have originated from the Industrial Revolution, and it is part. It's fascinating to me. You know, you use a lot of the terminology of system thinking and system theory, but it really just in just position to a reductionist way of seeing the world. We try to identify solution within the individual. We divide everything in parts. We reduce to the ultimate level, to the individual. We expect the individual to come up with a solution, and we have done this for products, I guess. Like you have one consumer, we have products for the individuals. We don't have products for communities. We don't have products that create a community. We don't have like pots that are for 20 people. We have pots for one person. And I never thought of that, of the inability of individuals to come up with systemic solutions. But I think I will bring that thought with me, because it really is a systemic barrier to create community innovation, to really create something that goes beyond the individual. And it is like it is another example of a very philosophical approach to creating innovation, to create a solution, to creating development. Yeah, that was just the thought that I had from Sunil. It really resonates well with me.
One of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking, Matteo, was that some of the good practice that you put on the screen was the community-owned renewable energy examples. And that was making me think about the types of activities that we sometimes have in enterprise and entrepreneurship education, which tend more to be focused on private business startup or modeling those bigger businesses, and the idea that there's a series of directors rather than that more democratic community owned. And yeah, I've not got a question, but I just want, maybe you could speak to that about, is that one of the important shifts that we might need to make?
I truly believe this is just another example of the same ontology, the same individualism. We prioritize individual profit over communal profit, if you want to call it communal profit, over communal benefits, just because we perceive that the individual has the ability to come up with a solution and being able to create innovation that promotes the health and well-being of everybody. And yeah, Sunil?
Yeah, I mean, I was just reflecting on that individualism thing, and also what David was saying about should I be the right person teaching this, kind of things when I don't feel I should be teaching. That's a tension, really. I mean, I'm again just reflecting on something I've been teaching. This is slightly different. I mean, it is social sustainability. This is about healthcare. And I do teach systems thinking in it, but then I also teach venture capital, a little bit around venture capital. And then one of the comments I got at the end of the unit from a student was, this course tends to be more communist. That was an interesting comment I got. I mean, though I teach a little bit of venture capital as well. I think that's the tension we all have as educators is, what should be the right mix? I mean, I think it's a problem because we do want to prepare the students for jobs and employability and the professional stuff, but at the same time, I mean, especially being in the business school, this is a tough one. And at the same time, we want them to think about the larger issues and think more about the social and environmental impact. Where do we balance? How much of each of what we teach? That's the critical question to ask, I suppose. Students also have an expectation, and I think there's no easy answer, I suppose, to this. I don't know if David
Yeah, David maybe has got
Yeah.
have you got a thought on that, David?
Which me?
Yeah. I don't know. I suppose
I mean, one of the things we've been trying to do recently is move over to community entrepreneurship and getting communities to take ownership and responsibility for their own destinies. When I was in Durham, I was very concerned about entrepreneurship revitalizing dying communities. And what I did was basically, encourage the promotion of SMEs. But really, it's about the community realizing that I used to give a lecture, you can no longer rely upon whether they are the wealthy countries of the world, whether they're the multinational companies, whether they are the state, the local government, you can no longer rely upon them. You've got to take ownership, take responsibility for your own actions. And in Wales, in the University of Trinity St David, what we've done is we've set up a project which is about community revitalization. And the heart of that community revitalization is introducing all members of the community, anybody, men, women, children, everybody, to the concept of entrepreneurship. Not entrepreneurship about necessarily making businesses, but entrepreneurship being about coming up with new ideas, new ways of thinking, not waiting for things to happen, not waiting to collect your benefit. I used to teach in the valleys of South Wales, and the young people there were hopeless. I don't mean, couldn't do anything. They just had no hope. There was no future. And what we've got to do is change the mindset and say, look, don't wait for things to happen. Bring about change, bring about improvements in your society. Take ownership, take responsibility. And if we can it's like what you were saying, Catherine, earlier about a community of interest. If you get a group of people with a different mindset, it's infectious. And change comes about. And it's not just about somebody, setting up a business and getting rich. It's about changing the society, changing the community. And that's essentially what we've been, we're trying to do it, obviously, by changing the mindsets of our students. But we're also trying to do it by changing the mindsets of the communities in which we're working as well.
David, may I ask a question? Do you think that that's easier to do in Wales, where, for example, you've just had legislation?
Yeah.
Is it something like the Looking After Future Generations Act? I know
Yeah. It helps. I'll say it publicly now. Having the policies helps. But it's the implementation of policy that is important. And, you've got to get people that understand why the policies are important, what might happen as a result of it. So it does happen. And we've just had a delegation from, Felicity's been involved in it, just had a delegation from India, and they have taken the Welsh Future Generations Act and are copying it for their province in India. And they're also talking to us about working with their young people, about changing the mindsets of the young people. I don't believe entrepreneurship education is about, I've said it in America, about getting everybody to set up a business. I believe it's about getting everybody to believe in themselves, to believe they can bring about change and bring about improvement. And importantly, in this context, not damage the environment or the livelihoods of other people. If you look back at some of the colonial entrepreneurship that went on, it's scandalous. I mean, it's not slavery we're talking about. It's total. Look at the Dutch East India Company and the way in which it, went about getting a monopoly of nutmeg. It carried out a war. It killed people. You know,
Yeah.
and all because they were driven by profit and the need to make money.
Thank you, David. And actually, I think David Higgins, when I said David before, went to say something. So I'm just going to check in. David, we've got a couple of minutes left. Do you fancy, if tooth willing or tooth extraction willing, if you're still there, do you want to say something by kind of way of rounding up from your perspective, David? Unless he's disappeared to take paracetamol, that could be the case. Yeah. And if he doesn't pop up, then I'm going to, because we're just a couple of minutes away from rounding up here. So I would just remind you of the two opportunities, one that's evolving, which is the special interest group of enterprise educators who are interested in reorienting themselves away from business as usual. So where we are in that process is we had a bit of a survey that went out to stakeholders. I think how you could roughly describe how that kind of shook out was that we had probably half of the respondents who were experts who were generously offering their help to that group, and then the other half who were concerned enterprise educators who were saying, I'm concerned, I might be personally concerned about a lack of action at my institution or in enterprise education or in the system more generally, but I'm not quite sure what to do. So people looking for ideas, activities, and also looking for leadership. So that speaks to what you were saying, David, about not letting external forces dictate what we're doing, but kind of grasping that opportunity and taking it forward ourselves. So David and I are going to be making a proposal to EUK about how we take that SIG forward. And Rob, when is the next board meeting that might look at that?
So it's towards the end of February.
Towards the end of February. And then we will hopefully hear about that and then have an first event in the springtime. That would mean by way of a timeline. And the other thing to re-mention is Barbara Tomasella's project. So that's the University of Derby and partners who are creating a sustainability mindset toolkit. So there was, Barbara put her email in the chat. If you're interested in that, you can get in touch and she will send you the link to the application form. And that is something that you can get involved in now going forwards. And just to remind you that all of the resources for the project that David and I did are on my ResearchGate. So there is the conference paper and there is the toolkit. And because the chapter's been published, you would need to email me to get hold of that. So let me just put my...
Could I just say, Catherine, that EUK will be publishing a history of entrepreneurship education. It's about 55 pages long, isn't it, Rob? Very shortly. We've actually got the proof out, and at the end of that, there is a session on a section on the future, and we will certainly we're planning on holding an event in the spring on the way forward. Yeah. So there's that. And from my point of view, a plug. If you want to know more about harmonious entrepreneurship, every Tuesday, usually, we produce a case study on LinkedIn. And if you look this coming Tuesday, you will see a harmonious entrepreneurship Christmas card. So happy Christmas to everybody. Have a peaceful time and a relaxed and enjoyable time. You academics that are working, I know how tiring it is. it's even more tiring being retired and you don't get paid for it either. But have a good Christmas.
Thank you so much, David. And what a great way to wrap up the
Thanks.
session. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Matteo. Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody, for your time in attending and your questions and your comments. It's really much appreciated. And we look forward to being in touch. All right, Mary.
Well,
Happy
thanks for
happy
organising,
holiday.
Catherine
All right, no problem
and
at all.
Rob. Thanks a lot.
I'm
Thanks
gonna
very much.
I'm gonna stay on, Rob and David, if you're okay to stay on. Just
Sure.
for a moment. Okay. Otherwise, goodbye, everybody.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.